at Psychology Ninjas HQ, we're looking at cognitive psychology and the multi-store model today. So where do you begin? Well, you need to remember that in cognitive psychology, models and theories are kind of used interchangeably, and therefore we're focusing on key terms as part of our explanation. It's often useful with models to think about the visual imagery of it and breaking that down. Here we've got our different processes represented by our arrows and our storage components represented by our boxes. Please don't worry if you know sensory register as sensory registry or sensory memory. It's all the same thing, and that's absolutely fine. So if we're thinking about this, our model needs to be broken down and described in more detail. The best way to do that is to talk about the duration, capacity and encoding of each of those separate stores, making sure that you're talking about at least 2 ideas per storage component. It's also really important that you talk about the processes between them, giving examples of attention, maintenance rehearsal and retrieval in order to access full marks for your knowledge. So where do you evaluate? Well, because models are theories, we're looking at a SODA approach once again with multi-store model. When we are looking at our multi-store model and our evaluation, we always want to be giving extension in order to develop our lines of argument. This might come in the place of talking about additional pieces of research or alternatively giving a different point of view. So how do we put this all together? Well, if we've got our 8 marker, evaluate the multi-store model, we're focusing on the command word evaluate, which means we need to have balance between our AO1, our description of the storage and processes within the multi-store model, and our AO3, our evaluation. We suggest you take an integrated or spliced approach to this, talking a little bit about your AO1, so that would be explaining the sensory register, including information about the duration, the capacity and encoding, and then starting to evaluate the model. Most of our research for support for the multi-store model comes from the fact that the stores are distinct, separate and have different capabilities. Badley 1966b is a really good one to use for this because it's our classic study for cognitive psychology. When using classic and contemporary studies, we want to be really cautious about not drifting into a different essay. So focusing on the findings only, like we have done here, that these stores are different because STM encodes acoustically, and we got confused if the acoustically similar word list was presented, but in LTM, that confusion didn't happen with acoustically similar word lists. In order to elaborate on this support, we've selected 2 different studies looking at duration, and that's the easiest place. Whether you use Peterson and Barrick et al. Or other pieces of research is entirely up to you. All of this adds external reliability to the way that the multi-store model explains memory. We're saying that the findings are consistent, that STM and LTM are 2 distinct separate stores. We're going to move on now to look at short-term memory, explaining the duration, capacity and encoding of this different separate store. We're now going to oppose the multi-store model by saying that it lacks ecological validity and that the research basis for it is problematic, partly because of the use of laboratory experiments, using unrealistic tasks that aren't then valid as an explanation of all memory. I would give an example here, and you could use Badley, Peterson, or any other study that you know. We're also going to be critical of the use of brain damaged patients and case studies to support the multi-store model, in that these are unique individuals, and therefore we've got issues with the generalisability of the findings to all people. We'd move on then to look at the long-term memory, again talking about duration, capacity and encoding. Here we're criticising the model because we're saying it's reductionist. By using a different theory, working memory model, we have to say why this is better rather than just plonking in a description of a different model. The working memory model is better because it suggests that short-term memory is not a single store, and we use KF's evidence in order to support that. We're then making the overall mini conclusion that the multi-store model lacks validity, lacks accuracy in explaining how memory works. We then talk about our processes, and we've discussed how that would work, and that's linking into the application of the multi-store model and how we've used this in society to improve memory. Chunking's a great one here, reducing the capacity of the information that we're trying to remember in order not to overload the short-term memory. We could also talk about this for dementia patients, again, not overloading the capacity. All of this gives credibility to the multi-store model in how our memory works. In the effective use of it is giving external validity. So let's have a look at a different exam question. Explain is our command word here. And this is broken down into two lots of 2 marks. One for our strength and one for our weakness. The strength mark is then broken down further, 1 mark for explaining or identifying a weakness, 1 mark for justifying it. Okay, here's another exam question, slightly different command word here. We've got discuss. Discuss is asking you to explain and then apply. And so it's all about examples that would help us. Here we're focusing on the multi-store model representing 2 distinct stores. And although it isn't explicitly asking about multi-store model, it is all the same information. Thanks for joining us today here at Psychology Ninjas. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell. See you next time.